Over the past 2 decades, 50 Cent has been involved in more lawsuits than most law firms handle in a year. He's been sued for millions. He's sued others for millions. He's won. He's lost. He's filed for bankruptcy to escape judgments. And through it all, he's learned something that most rappers never figure out, that in the modern world, getting rich from a courtroom is easier than rapping. This is the story of how a rapper from South Jamaica, Queens, turned lawsuits into $1 million strategy. How he learned to fight with lawyers as aggressively as he once fought with bullets and bars. How he transformed legal battles from something to avoid into something to weaponize. How he built a reputation as the most litigious figure in hip-hop and used that reputation to protect his empire, his image, and his money. By the end of this documentary, you'll understand how 50 Cent became known as the man who fights every battle, whether it's in the streets, on wax, or in court. You'll see how he turned conflict into cash, how he learned from devastating losses, and how he built a system that makes attacking him legally expensive, publicly embarrassing, and ultimately not worth it. This isn't just about lawsuits. This is about strategy. This is about survival. This is about how one of hip-hop's most controversial figures learned that in rap, you win with bars, but in business, you win with lawyers. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change how you see 50 Cent forever. To understand why Curtis Jackson became the most legally aggressive rapper in hip-hop history, you need to understand where he came from and what shaped his mindset about survival, retaliation, and never backing down. Curtis James Jackson III was born July 6, 1975, in South Jamaica, Queens, New York. His mother, Sabrina, was a drug dealer who died when Curtis was just 8 years old, murdered under mysterious circumstances that were never fully solved. His father was absent. Curtis was raised by his grandparents in a neighborhood where violence wasn't occasional. It was the daily reality. By the time he was 12, Curtis was already in the drug game himself, not because he wanted to be, but because it was the economy of his environment. By his teens, he was dealing crack cocaine, making money, and learning the rules of the streets. Trust no one, hit first, and never let disrespect slide. But Curtis was different from other dealers. He was smart, he was strategic. He understood that the drug game wasn't just about muscle. It was about reputation, territory, and making sure everyone knew what happened to people who crossed you. These lessons, learned before he could legally drive a car, would shape everything he did for the rest of his life. In the mid-90s, Curtis started taking rap seriously. He adopted the name 50 Cent, taken from a Brooklyn robber named Kelvin Martin, who was known for robbing anyone, anywhere. The name symbolized his approach. He'd take from anyone if he needed to, and he wasn't afraid of anyone. His early mixtapes caught attention, but they also caught the wrong kind of attention. In 2000, 50 Cent was shot 9 times outside his grandmother's house in Queens. 9 bullets. Face, hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest. He spent 5 months recovering. Most people would have quit rap, moved away, disappeared. 50 Cent did the opposite. He came back harder. He made his near-death experience part of his brand. He turned survival into credibility, and he learned the most important lesson of his life. When someone tries to destroy you, you don't just survive. You come back stronger and make sure they regret ever trying. This mindset, this absolute refusal to back down from any fight, this determination to respond to every threat with overwhelming force, this is the foundation of everything 50 Cent would do in his career. Every rap beef, every business decision, and yes, every lawsuit. Because what 50 Cent understood, even before he became famous, was that survival isn't about defense. Survival is about offense. Survival is about making sure everyone knows that attacking you costs more than it's worth. That lesson, learned in the streets of Queens, would become the core of his legal strategy years later. After surviving being shot 9 times, 50 Cent's career could have been over before it really started. Columbia Records dropped him. No label wanted to touch an artist who came with that much violence attached to his name. But then something happened that changed everything. Eminem heard his mixtapes. In 2002, Eminem and Dr. Dre signed 50 Cent to Shady Records and Aftermath Entertainment. His debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, dropped in February 2003 and sold 872,000 copies in its first week. It became one of the fastest-selling albums in hip-hop history. Songs like In Da Club, 21 Questions, and PIMP dominated radio and MTV. But 50's rise wasn't just about the music, it was about the warfare. Because while his album was breaking records, 50 was simultaneously waging the most aggressive rap beef campaign hip-hop had seen in years, targeting Ja Rule and Murder Inc.'s records with relentless precision. The beef with Ja Rule went back to 1999, before 50 was famous, stemming from a robbery incident and various street politics. But once 50 got his major label deal and platform, he turned that personal beef into a full-scale campaign to destroy Ja Rule's career. 50 released diss tracks: Life's on the Line, Back Down, Wanksta. Each one was designed not just to insult Ja Rule, but to systematically dismantle his credibility, his street reputation, and his commercial appeal. 50 attacked Ja Rule's masculinity, his authenticity, his whole image, and it worked. Within 2 years, Ja Rule went from one of the biggest rappers in the world to largely irrelevant in mainstream hip-hop. But 50 didn't just use music, he used strategy. He understood that destroying an opponent required multiple pressure points. So while he was releasing diss tracks, he was also going after Murder Inc., the label that Ja Rule was signed to, in other ways. In 2003, the IRS and FBI raided Murder Inc.'s offices as part of an investigation into money laundering. The label's CEO, Irv Gotti, was indicted on money laundering charges related to alleged connections to Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a notorious Queens drug dealer. Though Irv Gotti was eventually acquitted, the investigation crippled Murder Inc.'s business operations and reputation. Now, 50 Cent didn't cause the federal investigation, but he absolutely used it. He talked about it in interviews. He referenced it in songs. He made sure everyone knew that Murder Inc. was under federal scrutiny. He understood that you don't just attack your enemies directly, you amplify every problem they have, making their situation worse through public attention and pressure. This era taught 50 Cent several crucial lessons that would shape his approach to legal battles later. Lesson 1. Paperwork beats violence. The federal investigation did more damage to Murder Inc. than any diss track could. Legal problems destroy businesses and careers in ways that rap beef can't. Lesson 2. Public pressure is a weapon. By constantly talking about his enemies' legal troubles, 50 kept negative attention on them, making it harder for them to recover or move forward. Lesson 3. Attack on multiple fronts. Music, media, business pressure, street reputation. 50 learned that effective warfare requires hitting your opponent from every angle simultaneously. Lesson 4. Never stop until they're finished. 50 didn't just win against Ja Rule and Murder Inc. He kept attacking long after he'd won, ensuring they could never rebuild. These lessons, learned during the rap beef era when 50 was at the peak of his musical career, would become the blueprint for how he handled business disputes, contract negotiations, and eventually lawsuits. The mentality was the same. Identify the target, attack relentlessly, use every tool available, and never back down until you've won completely. As 50 Cent's fame grew in the mid-2000s, so did his understanding that protecting his brand required more than just street credibility and diss tracks. It required legal infrastructure. And that meant lawyers, trademarks, copyrights, and cease and desist letters. One of 50's earliest moves as a successful artist was aggressively protecting his intellectual property. Unlike many rappers who didn't think about the business side until it was too late, 50 immediately began filing trademarks for his name, his likeness, his catchphrases, and his brand identities. 50 Cent wasn't just his rap name, it became a trademark. G-Unit became a trademark. His logo became protected intellectual property. This wasn't just paperwork for the sake of paperwork. This was 50 understanding that his image had value, and that value needed legal protection. His first major legal moves weren't big lawsuits, they were cease and desist letters. These are formal legal demands sent to individuals or companies to stop using someone's intellectual property without permission, and 50 started sending them early and often. Bootleg merchandise, cease and desist. Someone using his image in advertising without permission, cease and desist. A company trying to trademark something close to G-Unit or 50 Cent, opposed and blocked. These early legal actions were relatively small, often settled with the recipient simply agreeing to stop what they were doing and maybe paying a small settlement. But they established something crucial: 50 Cent's reputation as someone who would aggressively defend his intellectual property. Why does this matter? Because in business, reputation is everything. If word gets around that you don't protect your trademarks, people will use them freely. But if everyone knows you sue immediately and aggressively, they think twice before using your name or image without permission. 50 was building that reputation intentionally. One early case that set the tone was against a company that tried to sell 50 Cent branded merchandise without his authorization. The company probably thought they could get away with it. After all, many celebrities don't notice or don't care about small-time knockoff merchandise. 50 noticed. His lawyers filed suit. The company settled quickly, paid damages, and agreed to destroy all unauthorized merchandise. The case barely made news, but it sent a message to the industry. Using 50 Cent's intellectual property without permission would be expensive and not worth the risk. Another early legal victory involved protecting the G-Unit brand. Multiple companies and individuals tried to capitalize on the popularity of G-Unit by creating similar-sounding brands or using the name in their businesses. 50's legal team systematically went after each one, filing trademark oppositions and infringement suits. In one case, a clothing company tried to sell G-Unit apparel without authorization. 50 sued. The company argued that G-Unit was a common phrase and not protectable. The court disagreed, ruling that 50 Cent had established G-Unit as a distinctive trademark associated with his brand. The company was forced to stop production and pay damages. These early wins were crucial not just for the money, which was relatively small compared to what 50 would earn from music and legitimate G-Unit merchandise, but because they established legal precedents. They created a paper trail of 50 Cent successfully defending his intellectual property in court. And they built confidence. 50 learned that courts would side with him when his rights were clearly violated. He learned that companies would rather settle than fight in court. He learned that having aggressive lawyers who filed immediately sent a deterrent message. And most importantly, he learned that legal action could be profitable, not just as a defensive measure, but as an offensive business strategy. By the mid-2000s, 50 Cent wasn't just a rapper or even just a businessman. He was becoming a brand that was legally protected, aggressively defended, and increasingly expensive to mess with. And that was exactly the reputation he wanted to build. Every empire has its setbacks. Every strategy has moments where it fails spectacularly. For 50 Cent, one of the most painful and expensive lessons in his legal education came from a company called Sleek Audio, a lesson that would cost him over $17 million and teach him that being aggressive in lawsuits cuts both ways. In 2007, 50 Cent partnered with Sleek Audio, a manufacturer of high-end headphones and audio equipment. The deal seemed straightforward. 50 would help design and promote Sleek by 50 headphones, and both parties would profit from the partnership. Given 50's success with other business ventures like G-Unit clothing and vitamin water, this seemed like another smart move, but the partnership soured quickly. According to Sleek Audio, 50 Cent didn't hold up his end of the agreement. He allegedly failed to promote the products as promised, missed appearances and promotional commitments, and generally didn't deliver what he'd contractually agreed to provide. In 2010, things got ugly. Sleek Audio sued 50 Cent for breach of contract and other claims. But 50, true to his aggressive nature, didn't just defend himself. He countersued, claiming that Sleek Audio had breached the contract first and had engaged in fraudulent business practices. This is where 50's attack everyone mentality backfired. Instead of carefully evaluating the strength of his position, instead of considering settlement, 50 went full force into litigation mode. He filed expansive counterclaims. His lawyers took aggressive positions in court filings. He was convinced he would win. After all, he'd won most of his legal battles up to this point. The case went to trial in 2012, and 50 Cent lost badly. The jury awarded Sleek Audio $16.2 million in damages. But it got worse. The judge added another $1 million for attorney's fees. The total judgment, $17.2 million. $17.2 million. That's not pocket change, even for someone as wealthy as 50 Cent. This wasn't a small settlement he could write a check for and move on. This was a massive judgment that required serious financial maneuvering to handle. But beyond the money, the loss was significant for other reasons. First, it was public. The hip-hop media covered it extensively. People saw that 50 Cent wasn't invincible in court. His reputation as someone who won every legal battle took a major hit. Second, it revealed a weakness in his strategy. 50's approach had always been to attack aggressively, countersue anyone who sued him, and use legal pressure to force settlements or victories. But against Sleek Audio, this approach failed. His counterclaims were dismissed. His aggressive tactics didn't intimidate the other side, and the jury saw through his arguments. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the Sleek Audio judgment created serious cash flow problems. Even though 50 Cent was wealthy on paper, having $17.2 million in liquid cash to pay a judgment immediately was a different matter. His wealth was tied up in investments, real estate, business ventures, and other assets that couldn't be quickly converted to cash without taking losses. This judgment would become a key factor in 50 Cent's decision to file for bankruptcy 3 years later, a decision that would prove to be another strategic move in his legal playbook. But in the immediate aftermath of the Sleek Audio loss, 50 learned several crucial lessons that would change how he approached lawsuits going forward. Lesson 1. You can't win every fight. No matter how aggressive you are, no matter how good your lawyers are, sometimes the facts aren't on your side and you lose. Lesson 2. Juries are unpredictable. 50 had won cases through settlements and negotiations, but trial by jury is different. 12 random people might not see things the way you do, especially if you come across as arrogant or if the other side presents sympathetic evidence. Lesson 3. Large judgments create leverage for opponents. Once Sleek Audio had a $17 million judgment, they had power. They could pursue 50's assets, put liens on properties, and create ongoing legal problems until they collected. Lesson 4. Sometimes settling is smarter than fighting. This was a hard lesson for someone whose entire identity was built on never backing down, but the Sleek Audio case proved that there are times when fighting to the end costs more than it's worth. The Sleek Audio judgment hung over 50 Cent for years. It would eventually become one of the major debts listed in his bankruptcy filing. But it also made him smarter, more careful, and more strategic about which legal battles to fight and how to fight them. If the Sleek Audio loss taught 50 Cent that you can't win every legal fight, the Rick Ross baby mama sex tape case taught him that trolling on social media can be very, very expensive. In 2014, 50 Cent was doing what he does best on social media, trolling his enemies and generating attention. His target this time was Rick Ross, a rapper he'd been feuding with for years. But 50 took it to another level. Lastonia Leviston, Rick Ross's ex-girlfriend and the mother of one of his children, had made a sex tape with another man, not Rick Ross, that was never meant to be public. Somehow, 50 Cent obtained a copy of this tape. And then he did something that would cost him millions. He posted it online. But 50 didn't just post the raw footage. He added his own narration and commentary, mocking Rick Ross and Leviston throughout the video. He added graphics. He made it into a production. And he shared it with his millions of followers, generating massive attention and humiliating Leviston in the process. Leviston sued 50 Cent for violating her privacy, causing emotional distress, and intentionally distributing the tape to harm her reputation and embarrass Rick Ross. The case went to trial in 2015. 50's defense was essentially that he was engaging in protected speech and that the video was commentary on his ongoing feud with Rick Ross, which made it a matter of public interest. His lawyers argued that as a public figure engaged in a public feud, posting commentary about his rival's personal life was protected expression. The jury didn't buy it. In July 2015, they awarded Leviston $5 million in damages, $2.5 million for the sex tape distribution itself, and another $2.5 million in punitive damages designed to punish 50 for his intentionally harmful conduct. $5 million for posting a sex tape with commentary. For someone who'd been shot 9 times and survived, this probably seemed like an abstract number at first. But this judgment, combined with the still unpaid Sleek Audio judgment, created a serious financial crisis. The sex tape case was particularly damaging because of the optics. The sleek audio case involved a business dispute, something that could happen to anyone in commerce. But the sex tape case made 50 look like a bully who would violate someone's privacy and dignity just to score points in a rap beef. Media coverage was harsh. Even fans who enjoyed 50's trolling persona started questioning whether he'd gone too far. The image of Curtis Jackson sitting in court while Leviston testified about the emotional trauma he'd caused her didn't fit the invincible street hustler narrative he'd built his career on. More importantly, the judgment was enforceable immediately. Leviston's lawyers started pursuing collection efforts. They wanted their $5 million, and they wanted it now. They filed paperwork to go after 50's assets, bank accounts, properties, business interests, anything that could be seized or liquidated to satisfy the judgment. 50 Cent was now facing over $22 million in court judgments between Sleek Audio and Leviston, plus interest that was accruing on both. His income was strong, but his cash position wasn't. His wealth was tied up in investments and assets that would take time to liquidate. And his creditors weren't willing to wait. This is when 50 Cent made one of the most controversial and strategically brilliant moves of his entire career. He filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. On July 13, 2015, just days after the $5 million verdict in the sex tape case, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in Connecticut federal court. The hip-hop world and media had a field day. Headlines screamed about 50 Cent being broke. Memes flooded social media showing 50 in various states of poverty. Critics who'd been waiting for his downfall celebrated. It looked like the ultimate humiliation for someone who'd built his entire brand on wealth and success. But anyone who understood bankruptcy law and business strategy knew something different. This wasn't a defeat. This was 50 Cent playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. First, let's be clear about what Chapter 11 bankruptcy actually is. It's not liquidation. It's not personal failure. Chapter 11 is a reorganization tool that allows individuals and businesses to restructure their debts while protecting assets from immediate seizure. It's used by major corporations all the time as a strategic business move. When 50 filed, he listed assets between $10 million and $50 million and debts of the same range. But here's the crucial detail. Most of his wealth wasn't in the bankruptcy estate. His business entities, his ownership stakes, his various corporate structures. These were separate legal entities that weren't part of the personal bankruptcy filing. What the bankruptcy did was immediately stop all collection efforts against him. The Sleek Audio judgment, frozen. The Leviston judgment, frozen. Any other creditors trying to collect, frozen. In bankruptcy, there's an automatic stay that prevents creditors from pursuing collection actions while the bankruptcy is pending. This gave 50 breathing room to reorganize his finances without the pressure of immediate asset seizures. Second, bankruptcy allowed 50 to negotiate with his creditors from a position of strength rather than weakness. Instead of creditors being able to pursue his assets individually, they now had to work through the bankruptcy court system. And in bankruptcy, creditors often settle for cents on the dollar because something is better than nothing and litigation is expensive. Over the next 2 years, 50 negotiated settlements with his creditors. Sleek Audio, he eventually reached a confidential settlement for much less than the $17 million judgment. Leviston, he settled for an undisclosed amount that was significantly less than $5 million. Other creditors accepted restructured payment terms. Third, the bankruptcy filing created a public narrative that 50 was able to control. Yes, people initially mocked him for being broke, but 50 leaned into that narrative on social media, posting pictures of himself with stacks of fake money, making jokes about his bankruptcy, and generally treating the whole thing like performance art. And then, gradually, he started showing that he wasn't actually broke. He'd post pictures from exotic vacations, he'd show off cars and jewelry, he'd talk about new business deals and television projects. The message became clear: the bankruptcy was strategic, not desperate. In 2017, 50 Cent's bankruptcy case was resolved. He'd settled with his creditors, reorganized his finances, and emerged with his business empire intact. The total amount he paid to creditors was never fully disclosed, but it was substantially less than the original judgments he faced. More importantly, 50 had learned the most advanced lesson in his legal education: that bankruptcy isn't a last resort for failures. It's a tool that wealthy people use to protect assets and restructure debts. It's part of the game. The bankruptcy also served another purpose. It changed how people approached suing 50 Cent. After seeing how he used bankruptcy to reduce judgments, potential plaintiffs had to consider whether it was even worth suing him. If he could just file bankruptcy and settle for a fraction of what you're awarded, why go through the expense and time of litigation? This reputation that 50 Cent had sophisticated financial and legal strategies for dealing with judgments became its own form of protection. It made him a less attractive target for lawsuits because even if you won, collecting would be difficult and uncertain. After emerging from bankruptcy in 2017, 50 Cent entered a new phase of his legal strategy. He'd learned from his losses. He'd learned how to use bankruptcy as a shield. Now he was ready to use lawsuits as a sword. This is when 50 transitioned from being primarily a defendant in lawsuits to being an aggressive plaintiff. He didn't just defend himself when sued. He actively sued people and companies that he felt had wronged him, violated his rights, or damaged his reputation. The shift was strategic. By filing lawsuits, 50 could control the narrative, put opponents on the defensive, and force them to spend time and money defending themselves. Even if he didn't win every case, the act of suing sent a message. Mess with 50 Cent and you'll be dealing with lawyers, court dates, and public scrutiny. One of his first major moves after bankruptcy was going after media companies and publications for defamation. If a blog, website, or news outlet published something about 50 that he felt was false and damaging, his lawyers would send a cease and desist letter first, and if the content wasn't removed or corrected, they'd file suit. In one case, a gossip website published a story claiming 50 was involved in certain illegal activities. The story was based on unverified sources and lacked solid evidence. 50's legal team immediately demanded a retraction. When the website refused, they filed a defamation lawsuit. The case never went to trial. The website, facing expensive litigation and potential damages, settled. They removed the story, issued a public apology, and reportedly paid a settlement to 50. The exact amount was never disclosed, but the message was clear. Publishing false stories about 50 Cent would cost you money. 50 also began aggressively protecting his image rights. Anytime a company used his photo, name, or likeness in advertising without permission, he'd sue. This included everything from small businesses using his image in local ads to major companies that should have known better. These weren't always huge cases. Sometimes the damages were modest, but 50 filed them anyway, because each successful case added to his reputation as someone who protected his brand zealously. And that reputation itself became valuable. It made companies more careful about using his image, which meant fewer violations to begin with. One particularly interesting category of lawsuits involved unauthorized biography projects and documentary films. When producers would attempt to make documentaries about 50 without his cooperation or authorization, especially if they were using his music or image without proper licensing, he'd sue to block production or force proper compensation. In one instance, a documentary about his life was being produced without his involvement. The filmmakers claimed they were within their rights to create an unauthorized biography. 50 sued, arguing that they were using his name, image, and music without proper licensing. The case settled with the producers agreeing to pay licensing fees and give 50 approval rights over how he was portrayed. This gave 50 unprecedented control over his narrative. By aggressively challenging any attempt to tell his story without his input, he ensured that the public version of Curtis Jackson remained the version he wanted people to see. 50 also sued former business partners who he felt had violated their agreements or damaged his business interests. When partners failed to live up to contractual obligations, when they tried to use G-Unit branding without authorization, or when they made public statements he considered defamatory, he didn't hesitate to file suit. These business litigation cases rarely made headlines, but they were crucial to maintaining his empire. By being known as someone who would absolutely take you to court if you breached a contract or tried to take advantage of a business relationship, 50 made people more careful about how they dealt with him. The cumulative effect of all these lawsuits, some big, some small, some settled, some fought to verdict, was that 50 Cent became known as the most litigious figure in hip-hop. And that wasn't accidental. That was exactly the reputation he wanted. Because here's the truth about lawsuits in the business world. Most people and companies would rather avoid them. Litigation is expensive, time-consuming, stressful, and uncertain. The average business would rather just not deal with someone known for suing frequently and aggressively. So, 50's reputation as someone who would sue at the drop of a hat became its own form of protection. It made people think twice before using his name or image. It made business partners more careful about fulfilling their obligations. It made media outlets more cautious about what they published about him. 50 had weaponized the legal system, turning it from something that happened to him into something he used proactively to protect and expand his empire. Of all 50 Cent's legal battles, perhaps none captured his unique blend of trolling, litigation, and media savvy quite like his lawsuit against a Manhattan plastic surgeon named Angela Cogan. The case itself was relatively straightforward, but how 50 handled it became a masterclass in using legal action for brand protection while simultaneously generating publicity and entertainment. In 2017, Dr. Angela Cogan, a plastic surgeon operating a medical spa in New York, posted before and after photos of a patient on her business's Instagram account. Nothing unusual about that. Doctors post patient results all the time. But there was one problem. One of the before photos she used wasn't her patient. It was 50 Cent. Dr. Cogan had taken a photo of 50 from when he'd dramatically lost weight for a movie role. He dropped from 214 pounds to 160 pounds to play a cancer patient in the film All Things Fall Apart. And she used that image as an example of a patient with sunken cheeks and facial volume loss. The implication was that her services could fix that kind of facial deterioration. This was a spectacularly bad decision on the doctor's part. She was using a celebrity's image without permission. She was implying that 50 Cent was her patient, which he wasn't. And she was essentially using his appearance as a before picture that needed fixing. 50 Cent's lawyers immediately sent a cease and desist letter demanding she remove the post and issue a public apology. When Dr. Cogan initially resisted, they filed a lawsuit seeking $1 million in damages for unauthorized use of his likeness, false endorsement, and damage to his reputation. But here's where it gets interesting. Most celebrities would have just pursued the case quietly through the court system. Not 50. He took to social media and turned the entire situation into a viral moment. He posted about the lawsuit on Instagram with his typical mix of humor and intimidation. He made memes about doctors trying to use his face to sell plastic surgery. He trolled Dr. Cogan publicly, generating millions of impressions and making the case part of hip-hop's daily conversation. The combination of serious legal action and public mockery was devastating. Dr. Cogan faced not just a lawsuit, but also massive negative publicity. Her business's social media was flooded with comments from 50's fans. Media outlets picked up the story, with headlines like "Plastic Surgeon Gets Sued by 50 Cent for Using His Photo." Within weeks, Dr. Cogan settled. The terms were confidential, but she issued a public apology, removed all unauthorized images, and reportedly paid a settlement to 50. The case was resolved without going to trial, but the impact lasted far beyond the settlement. The plastic surgeon case became a meme within hip-hop culture, a perfect example of 50's approach to protecting his image. It showed that 50 would sue over even relatively minor infractions, that he wouldn't accept apologies without compensation, and that he'd use social media to amplify pressure on defendants. More importantly, it sent a message to anyone considering using 50's image without permission. It's not worth it. Even if you think it's a small thing, even if you think he won't notice, even if you think it's fair use, he'll notice, he'll sue, and he'll make your life difficult until you settle. The case also demonstrated 50's understanding of how to blend entertainment with business protection. By making the lawsuit into content, posting about it, joking about it, turning it into social media engagement, he got publicity value out of the legal action itself. It wasn't just about protecting his image rights, it was about reinforcing his brand as someone who doesn't let anything slide. This approach, serious legal action combined with public pressure and entertainment value, became 50's signature move in subsequent cases. He'd turned lawsuits into content, and content into protection. Throughout the late 2010s and into the 2020s, 50 Cent became increasingly aggressive about suing for defamation. Any publication that printed false information about him, any blogger who made unsubstantiated claims, any media outlet that published content he considered defamatory, they all faced the possibility of legal action. This wasn't new behavior from 50, but the frequency and systematization of his defamation claims increased significantly. He'd essentially created a legal tripwire around his reputation. If you published something false about him, you were getting a cease and desist letter within days and a lawsuit soon after if you didn't comply. One notable example involved a media outlet that published a story claiming 50 was connected to criminal activity based on anonymous sources. The story suggested he was involved in activities that, if true, could have damaged his business relationships and even potentially led to criminal investigation. 50's legal team moved immediately. They sent a detailed cease and desist letter pointing out that the story was based entirely on unverified anonymous sources, that no evidence supported the claims, and that the publication had failed to contact 50 or his representatives for comment before publishing. When the outlet refused to retract the story, arguing it was protected journalism based on confidential sources, 50 sued for defamation. The case centered on whether the publication had acted with actual malice, the legal standard for defaming a public figure, which requires knowing the information was false or acting with reckless disregard for the truth. 50's lawyers argued that publishing serious criminal allegations based solely on anonymous sources without any attempt to verify or seek comment constituted reckless disregard. The publication argued they'd trusted their sources and believed the information was newsworthy. The case settled before trial, with the publication agreeing to remove the story, publish a clarification, and pay an undisclosed settlement to 50. Again, the exact terms were confidential, but the pattern was clear. 50 would rather sue and settle than let false stories remain public. Another defamation case involved a blogger who'd built a following by posting gossip about hip-hop artists. This blogger published multiple posts claiming 50 was broke after his bankruptcy, that his business ventures were failing, and that he'd lost his wealth and influence. These claims were demonstrably false. 50's post-bankruptcy financial disclosures and his ongoing business success proved he wasn't broke. But the blogger kept publishing these stories because they generated traffic and engagement. 50 sued the blogger for defamation and won a default judgment when the blogger failed to properly defend the case. While collecting from a small-time blogger wasn't going to generate significant money, the lawsuit served another purpose. It created legal precedent that 50 could use in future cases, and it sent a message to other bloggers and gossip sites. The cumulative effect of these defamation cases was significant. Media outlets became more careful about what they published about 50 Cent. Editors started requiring better verification before running stories about him. Bloggers thought twice before posting unverified gossip. But here's what made 50's defamation strategy particularly effective. He wasn't trying to win every case in court. He was trying to make it too expensive and risky to publish false information about him. Even if you ultimately won the case, defending yourself against a defamation lawsuit costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. For most small media outlets and bloggers, that's not sustainable. So the threat of being sued became its own deterrent. Publications that might have previously published questionable stories about 50 started passing on those stories, or at least seeking comment and verification first. The legal pressure changed behavior. This is the essence of 50's litigation strategy. Create such a consistent pattern of legal consequences for violating your rights that people self-police and avoid actions that might lead to lawsuits. It's more efficient to prevent violations than to constantly sue after they happen. Chapter 11, 50 Cent's Lawsuit Tactics, the Systematic Approach. By the 2020s, 50 Cent had developed a comprehensive, systematic approach to legal battles that was unlike anything else in hip-hop. It wasn't ad hoc or reactive. It was a deliberate strategy executed with precision and consistency. Let's break down the specific tactics that make 50's legal approach so effective. When 50's rights are violated, his legal team doesn't wait. Cease and desist letters go out within days. If compliance isn't immediate, lawsuits are filed within weeks. This speed serves multiple purposes. It shows he's serious, it prevents violations from becoming normalized or accepted, and it catches defendants before they've had time to hide assets or prepare robust defenses. 50 has mastered the art of filing lawsuits in a way that generates publicity. His legal team often alerts media to major filings, or 50 posts about them on social media. This creates public pressure on defendants and damages their reputation before the case is even heard. But settlements almost always include confidentiality clauses. This means 50 gets to control the narrative. Everyone knows he sued, but only he knows the settlement terms. This creates the impression that he's winning bigger than he might actually be, because people assume the settlements are for large amounts even when they might be modest. 50 doesn't just file lawsuits and let the court process play out. He actively uses social media and media relationships to keep attention on the case. He'll post about defendants, mock them publicly, and generally make the experience of being sued by him as unpleasant as possible. This isn't just trolling for entertainment, it's strategic. The negative attention makes defendants more willing to settle quickly just to end the public scrutiny. 50 and his team monitor for trademark violations constantly. Any unauthorized use of 50 Cent, G-Unit, or related brands triggers immediate legal action. This vigilance prevents the trademarks from becoming diluted or generic, which is crucial for maintaining their legal protection. False stories, fake news, misleading headlines. 50's team responds to these within hours, not days or weeks. The faster you respond to misinformation, the less it spreads, and the easier it is to contain. This is perhaps the most important tactic. 50 follows through. When his lawyers send a cease and desist letter, it's not an empty threat. If you don't comply, they will file suit. This reputation for following through makes his legal threats credible and increases the likelihood that defendants will comply without litigation. 50 doesn't hire lawyers who are passive or overly diplomatic. He hires aggressive litigators who will fight hard and won't back down. This ensures that defendants know they're in for a real battle, not just paperwork exchanges. 50 doesn't just sue people. His legal strategy involves trademarks, copyrights, contracts, cease and desists, takedown notices, and various other legal mechanisms. By using multiple tools, he creates a comprehensive web of legal protection that's hard to navigate around. Win or lose, 50 studies what worked and what didn't. The losses to Sleek Audio and Leviston taught him valuable lessons that made him smarter in subsequent cases. He doesn't repeat mistakes, and he adapts his tactics based on results. Ultimately, 50's entire legal strategy is designed to make attacking him legally, financially, or reputationally not worth the cost. Even if you might technically have a right to do something, the hassle and expense of dealing with his legal response makes it easier to just not do it. This systematic approach is what separates 50 from other celebrities who sue occasionally. This isn't emotional or reactive, it's calculated business strategy. And it works. While 50 Cent's legal losses get significant attention, his wins are equally important to understanding his overall strategy. These victories reinforced his approach, validated his tactics, and added to his reputation as someone whose legal threats should be taken seriously. Over the years, 50 has successfully defended his trademarks dozens of times. Every time someone tried to use 50 Cent or G-Unit without authorization and 50 challenged them, he's won. These victories might seem small individually, but collectively they've established ironclad legal protection for his brand identity. 50 has successfully sued numerous companies for unauthorized use of his image in advertising, from small businesses using his photo in local ads to larger companies making more sophisticated, unauthorized uses. 50's track record of winning these cases is nearly perfect. Most settle before trial, but even the settlements count as wins. While exact terms are confidential, 50 has secured settlements from multiple media outlets and bloggers for publishing false information about him. These settlements typically include financial payments, public retractions or apologies, and agreements not to repeat the false claims. In several cases involving business partners who allegedly violated their agreements with 50, he's either won judgments or secured settlements that enforce the original contract terms. This has been crucial for maintaining the integrity of his business relationships. As discussed earlier, the Dr. Kogan case resulted in a settlement that included an apology, removal of unauthorized images, and reportedly, a financial payment. This case was particularly significant because of the publicity it generated. 50 has successfully blocked or forced modifications to several unauthorized documentary projects through legal action. By asserting his rights over the use of his music, image, and name, he's maintained control over how his story is told publicly. 50's team has shut down numerous bootleg merchandise operations through legal action. While these individual cases might not be for large amounts, collectively they've protected the legitimate G-Unit merchandise business from competition by counterfeiters. What's important about these wins isn't just the individual victories, it's the pattern they create. Each win reinforces 50's legal credibility. Each settlement adds to his reputation. Each successful enforcement action makes the next one easier because defendants know he has a track record of winning. The cumulative effect is that 50 Cent has one of the strongest legal reputations in entertainment. His intellectual property rights are taken seriously. His image rights are respected. His contracts are enforced. And violations are expensive. This didn't happen by accident. This is the result of decades of systematic legal action, learning from both wins and losses, and building a reputation that serves as its own form of protection. One of the most common questions about 50 Cent's legal strategy is, how much money has he actually made from lawsuits? The honest answer is, we don't know exactly, and we probably never will. Settlement agreements in the vast majority of cases include confidentiality clauses that prevent either party from disclosing the terms. Public records only show that settlements were reached, not the amounts. However, we can make educated estimates based on typical settlement ranges, the types of cases 50 has filed, and statements from legal experts who've analyzed his litigation pattern. These are probably the 50's most frequent legal actions. Small businesses using his image without permission, unauthorized merchandise, trademark violations. These cases typically settle in the $10,000 to $100,000 range, depending on the scale of the violation and the defendant's ability to pay. Over the past 20 years, 50 has filed or threatened legal action in dozens, possibly over 100 of these cases. Even assuming an average settlement of $25,000, which is conservative, that's potentially $2.5 million plus just from these smaller cases. Defamation settlements vary widely based on the defendant and the extent of damages. Media outlets with insurance and significant resources might settle for $50,000 to $500,000 or more. Smaller bloggers might settle for less. 50 has filed multiple defamation cases over the years. Even assuming modest settlements averaging $75,000 per case, if he settled 10 to 15 defamation cases, that's another $750,000 to $1.1 million. Cases involving contract disputes, business partner conflicts, and commercial disagreements can result in much larger settlements, potentially 6 or 7 figures depending on what's at stake. 50 has been involved in several of these types of cases. While we can't know the settlement amounts, it's reasonable to estimate that successful business litigation could have generated $1 to $3 million in settlements and judgments in his favor. When unauthorized documentaries, books, or other projects use 50's music, image, or story without proper licensing, the settlements can be substantial, often in the $100,000 to $500,000 plus range, because the projects themselves are designed to be profitable. 50 has blocked or forced settlements in several of these cases. Conservative estimate, $500,000 to $1 million. Based on these conservative estimates, trademark/image cases, $2.5 million plus. Defamation cases, $750,000 to $1.1 million. Business litigation, $1 to $3 million. Licensing disputes, $500,000 to $1 million. But that's using conservative numbers. Some legal experts who've studied 50's litigation history estimate the total could be significantly higher, possibly $8 to $10 million or even more when you account for larger settlements we don't know about. Cases that were settled privately before becoming public. Ongoing royalties from licensing agreements reached through litigation. minus indirect financial benefits from enhanced trademark protection. It's also important to note that these estimates don't include the value of avoided losses. By aggressively protecting his intellectual property, 50 has prevented countless unauthorized uses that would have diluted his brand value and reduced his legitimate licensing revenue. That preventive value could be worth tens of millions over the course of his career. The bottom line, while we can't know exact figures, it's clear that lawsuits have been profitable for 50 Cent. Not as profitable as his music or his major business deals like vitamin water, but certainly worth millions of dollars and possibly worth more than some of his other business ventures. More importantly, the lawsuits serve dual purposes. They generate revenue directly through settlements, and they protect the overall brand value that generates much larger revenue through legitimate channels. Given how much attention 50 Cent's legal battles receive, it's not surprising that numerous misconceptions have developed about his litigation strategy. Let's debunk the most common myth's reality. While 50 is definitely litigious compared to most celebrities, he doesn't actually sue randomly or frivolously. His lawsuits are targeted at specific violations: unauthorized use of his image, trademark infringement, defamation, and breach of contract. These are all legitimate legal causes of action. The perception that he sues everyone comes from the fact that he sues quickly and publicly, which creates more media coverage than cases filed quietly by other celebrities. Reality. There's a difference between aggressive legal protection and bullying. 50 sues when his rights are actually violated, when someone uses his image without permission, when false information is published, when contracts are breached. These are all legally actionable offenses. The fact that he follows through on legal threats doesn't make him a bully. It makes him someone who takes his rights seriously. Reality. While settlements certainly add to 50's wealth, the primary purpose of most of his lawsuits is brand protection, not revenue generation. Many of his cases are about establishing precedent, deterring future violations, and maintaining control over his image and narrative. The money is nice, but the reputation as someone whose intellectual property is protected is more valuable long-term. Reality, as we discussed earlier, 50's bankruptcy was a strategic financial reorganization, not an indication of actual poverty. His assets were substantial. He just used bankruptcy protection to restructure debts and settle for less than the original judgments. The bankruptcy actually demonstrated sophisticated financial planning, not failure. Reality. This myth probably stems from the high-profile losses to Sleek Audio and Leviston. But when you look at the full body of his legal actions, 50 has a strong winning record. Most of his cases settle in his favor, and the cases that go to verdict have mixed results, but his overall win rate is solid. Reality. In some segments of the public, 50's litigiousness might seem negative, but in the business world, his reputation for aggressively protecting his rights is actually respected. It signals that he's serious about his business, and that dealings with him will be handled professionally and legally. Reality. The fact that his cases regularly result in settlements and victories proves they have merit. Frivolous lawsuits get dismissed by judges early in the process. 50's cases survive dismissal motions and either go to trial or settle, which indicates they're based on legitimate legal claims. Most of these misconceptions stem from the same source. People see 50's aggressive, public approach to litigation and assume it must be unreasonable or frivolous. But when you actually examine the cases, most involve clear violations of his legal rights. What makes 50 different from other celebrities isn't that he files illegitimate cases. It's that he files legitimate cases more quickly, more publicly, and more consistently than others do. That aggressiveness is a choice, and it's a choice that serves his business interests. The real story isn't 50 Cent is a lawsuit bully. It's 50 Cent has turned legal protection into a systematic business strategy that most celebrities are too passive to implement. After emerging from bankruptcy in 2017, 50 Cent's business focus shifted significantly. While he continued his music career, his primary attention moved to television production, particularly the Power franchise for Starz. The original Power series, which ran from 2014 to 2020, became one of the most successful shows in cable television history. It spawned multiple spin-offs: Power Book 2, Ghost, Power Book 3, Raising Kanan, and Power Book 4, Force, with more planned. But what many people don't realize is that 50's legal battles, particularly the lessons he learned from losses and bankruptcy, directly contributed to his success in television. After losing millions to Sleek Audio because of unclear contract terms, 50 became obsessive about contract structure. When negotiating his deal with Starz for Power, he made sure every detail was ironclad. Clear ownership stakes, specific revenue sharing terms, rights to spin-offs and derivative works, creative control provisions, exit clauses if certain benchmarks weren't met. This attention to contractual detail meant that as Power became successful, 50's financial participation was protected. He couldn't be cut out of spin-off profits or derivative works because those rights were explicitly spelled out in the original agreement. 50 aggressively protected the Power brand through trademarks and copyrights. Any unauthorized Power merchandise, any bootleg streams or downloads, any trademark infringement, his legal team shut it down immediately. This protection ensured that the legitimate Power business, official merchandise, licensing deals, streaming rights, remained profitable because it wasn't competing with unauthorized alternatives. The bankruptcy had taught 50 that having leverage in negotiations was crucial. When Power became a massive hit, he was in a position to negotiate aggressively with Starz. He secured deals that gave him not just acting and producing fees, but also ownership stakes in the show and its spin-offs. He negotiated for more creative control. He leveraged the show's success into a broader production deal. The aggressive negotiation tactics he'd learned through years of legal battles translated directly into advantageous business agreements in television. 50 wasn't afraid to use public pressure even with his business partners. When he felt Starz wasn't promoting Power adequately, he'd call them out on social media. When negotiations got difficult, he'd hint publicly that he might walk away or take his ideas elsewhere. This was the same tactic he used in lawsuits, using public attention and pressure to influence private negotiations. And it worked in television just as it had in legal battles. Power and its spin-offs have been enormously profitable for 50 Cent. While exact figures aren't public, industry estimates suggest he's earned tens of millions of dollars from the franchise, possibly $100 million plus when you include all revenue streams, acting fees, executive producing fees, minus ownership stakes in the shows, licensing and merchandise, overall production deals with Starz. This television empire wouldn't have been possible without the legal education 50 received over the previous decade. The contract sophistication, the IP protection, the negotiation tactics, the use of leverage, these were all skills honed through years of legal battles. In a very real sense, 50 Cent's legal losses taught him lessons that made his television success possible. The $17 million he lost to Sleek Audio became tuition in a business education that generated $100 million plus in television revenue. We've reached the end of our investigation into 50 Cent's legal strategy. So what's the final verdict? What's the legacy of Curtis Jackson's two-decade journey through the American legal system? 50 Cent started as a street hustler from Queens who survived being shot 9 times. He became a rap superstar through aggressive beef tactics and undeniable talent. And then he evolved into something unprecedented, a businessman who uses the legal system as aggressively as he once used rap battles and street reputation. This transformation didn't happen by accident. It was the result of painful losses that taught expensive lessons, strategic thinking that saw lawsuits as business tools, consistent execution that built reputation and precedent, adaptation that learned from every win and loss, sophistication that grew with each legal battle. Let's summarize what we've learned about the financial aspect. Lost approximately $22 million in judgments, Sleek Audio and Leviston. Used bankruptcy to settle for significantly less, possibly $10 to $15 million total paid. Generated an estimated $5 to $10 million plus from settlement victories and judgments in his favor. Protected brand value worth potentially hundreds of millions through aggressive IP defense. Learned legal sophistication that helped him negotiate $100 million plus in television deals. When you look at those numbers, 50's legal strategy isn't just effective, it's profitable. The losses were expensive tuition, but the education paid off exponentially. 50 Cent is now known throughout the entertainment industry as someone who will sue immediately if his rights are violated, follows through on legal threats consistently, uses publicity and pressure as legal tactics, settles most cases but isn't afraid to go to trial, protects his intellectual property zealously, learns from every legal experience, has sophisticated lawyers and strong legal strategy. This reputation serves as its own form of protection. Companies think twice before using his image without permission. Media outlets verify stories about him more carefully. Business partners take contracts with him seriously. Potential adversaries consider whether legal action against him is worth the cost. What makes 50's approach unique isn't that he sues people. Lots of celebrities sue. What's unique is how he's systematized legal action into a comprehensive business strategy. 1. Preventive. Aggressive trademark protection prevents violations before they happen. 2. Responsive. Immediate cease and desists and lawsuits respond to violations quickly. 3. Public. Using media and social media to amplify legal pressure. 4. Educational. Learning from every case to improve future strategy. 5. Profitable. Generating revenue from settlements while protecting brand value. 6. Integrated. Using legal sophistication in all business dealings, not just disputes. This systematic approach is unprecedented in hip-hop and rare even in the broader entertainment industry. What can other artists and entrepreneurs learn from 50 Cent's legal journey? Lesson 1. Protect your intellectual property from day one. Trademarks, copyrights, and contracts matter more than most people realize. Lesson 2. Respond to violations immediately. The longer you wait, the harder it is to enforce your rights. Lesson 3. Don't be afraid of legal action. Yes, it's expensive, but letting people violate your rights is more expensive long term. Lesson 4. Learn from losses. 50's biggest legal setbacks became his most valuable education. Lesson 5. Reputation matters. Being known as someone who aggressively defends their rights prevents future violations. Lesson 6. Combine legal action with other pressure tactics. Public attention, media coverage, and social media can enhance legal effectiveness. Lesson 7. Know when to settle. Fighting every case to verdict isn't always smart. Strategic settlements can be wins even if they involve compromise. The cultural impact. 50 Cent has changed how hip-hop thinks about legal strategy. Before him, most rappers saw lawsuits as something that happened to them, either being sued or dealing with legal problems. 50 showed that lawsuits could be a proactive business tool. You can see his influence in how younger artists now approach intellectual property protection, how they structure their business deals, and how they respond to violations of their rights. The idea that an artist should be as aggressive legally as they are musically, that's part of the 50's legacy. So, is 50 Cent a legal mastermind? Based on the evidence we've examined, yes. He took painful losses and turned them into education. He learned sophisticated strategies and executed them consistently. He built a reputation that serves as its own protection. He generated revenue from legal action while protecting brand value. And he applied legal lessons to broader business success. Most importantly, he proved that the tools of the legal system, traditionally seen as defensive measures or last resorts, can be wielded offensively as business weapons. Lawsuits aren't just about resolving disputes. They're about protecting assets, deterring violations, generating settlements, and establishing precedent. 50 Cent learned that in rap, you win with bars, but in business, you win with lawyers, and he became a master of both. The phrase million-dollar strategy in our title is actually an understatement. 50's legal approach has likely generated millions directly through settlements. It saved millions more by preventing violations and protecting intellectual property, and it's contributed to wealth generation worth hundreds of millions through the business sophistication it developed. But beyond the money, the strategy is about power, legal power, business power. The power to control your narrative, protect your brand, and make sure that anyone who wants to use your name, image, or story has to come through you. That's the real million-dollar strategy, turning the legal system from something that happens to you into something you wield, making lawsuits work for you instead of against you, and building a reputation so fearsome that your legal rights rarely need to be actively enforced because everyone already knows the consequences. From the streets of South Jamaica, Queens, to the courtrooms of Manhattan, from surviving 9 gunshots to filing 9 cease and desist letters, from rap beef to legal briefs. Curtis, 50 Cent Jackson, has lived multiple lives, and in each one, the core principle remained the same. Never back down, always hit back harder, and make sure everyone knows that attacking you costs more than it's worth. His legal journey isn't just a story about lawsuits and settlements. It's a story about evolution, about learning, about taking the lessons from one arena, the streets, the rap game, and applying them to another, the courtroom, the boardroom. 50 Cent became one of the most successful figures in hip-hop, not just because of his music, but because he understood that success in the modern world requires legal sophistication. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't protect your intellectual property, if you don't enforce your contracts, if you don't defend your reputation, someone will take advantage. So 50 built a system, a legal machine that operates consistently, aggressively, and effectively. A reputation that prevents violations before they happen. A sophistication that turns legal battles into business advantages. And that system has made him not just wealthy, but powerful in a way that transcends money. When people know that using your name without permission will cost them tens of thousands in legal fees and settlements, when media outlets verify stories about you twice because they know you'll sue for defamation, when business partners honor their contracts because they know you'll enforce them, that's power. This is the story of how 50 Cent turned lawsuits into a million-dollar strategy, how he learned that paperwork beats violence, how he discovered that lawyers can be more devastating than bullets, how he built an empire not just on music and business deals, but on the systematic, aggressive use of legal rights. In rap, you win with bars. In business, you win with lawyers. And Curtis Jackson became a master of both. That's not just a million-dollar strategy. That's a blueprint for modern success.